Welcome to the Backyard Philosophy Podcast, a podcast where a couple of fools grab some cold ones and talk by the fire. So crack a cold one, come sit by the fire, and get a few laughs as we discuss everything from the meaning of life, space travel, and weird moments in history.
Today we're going to talk about things that like to get hammered. No, I'm not talking about you, Mike. We're talking about nails.
Hammer in which way?
Yes. Before we get too far into it, how are you doing? What are you drinking?
I'm doing all right. And what am I drinking? I'm drinking some type of bourbon. It's okay. It does the job. What about you, my friend? How are you?
Good. I got some Rogue Winter Ale. But we're going to talk about nails. Just the history of nails. So nails, a surprisingly common thing in our day and age. Not super common. Mike, you want to take a guess what the first nails were made out of?
Copper, right?
Technically, the first nails were made out of wood.
Yeah, and that's not.
Well, you used a harder wood as the nail, like an oak. How old do you think the first wooden nail is?
Well, let's see here. I would say it's definitely after the invention
So
of
give you a
agriculture.
hint. The first metal nail, 3,400 BC.
Oh, then I'm putting wooden nail around 8,000 BC.
Yeah, 7,000.
Hey, look at me. Look at it. I'm nailing it, Nick.
Yes, you are.
I gotta say, you told me before recording there's gonna be a lot of puns. Nail might be one of my new favorite words.
Yeah, I quickly realized what I got myself into.
You really nailed it doing this one. Don't shoot me.
Yep. But yeah, so nails, even when the first metal nail was discovered, 3,400 years BC in the Middle East, they weren't very common because you had to hand make every single one. And so it just wasn't really feasible. For the longest time, people really didn't use nails.
And also, I imagine if you went generations without them, you learned different building patterns, so you didn't really have a need for them.
Yeah, and since nail technology really didn't change from 3,400 BC up until like the 1760s, the only thing we're going to discuss, just because I was trying to think of like nails in society, what do you think, Mike, is the closest nails get to being a part of culture or culturally relevant?
Ooh, well, I would say either drinking games or pipe bombs.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the story of Jesus getting nailed to the cross.
Oh, yeah. I don't really hit the nail on the head when it comes to religion stuff.
Yep. Okay.
Oh, this is fun for me. This is hell for you. It's like you're getting nailed to a cross.
So I was just kind of curious of because nails were expensive. So in my head, and they weren't as strong and sturdy as the nails we know today. So I was like, well, how big were these nails?
They're pretty fucking big.
Yeah, they're between 7 to 9 inches.
Aren't they called rose nails or something like that? Like, don't they have their own name for them?
I didn't look too far into it because it was hard to find any.
You couldn't hammer down the nail research?
There was just too much like religious stuff that was clearly not scientific that I had to weed through, and I didn't feel like it was that important to get more info on the nails.
A nail in the haystack, so to speak.
I believe the term is a needle in the haystack.
That was a stretch. I'm coming out of my mouth. I knew that one was a stretch.
But supposedly, I think they found nails that may or may not have been used during the crucifixion in some guy's tomb because they were lost and then they're found again. But that's pretty much all I got out of that.
I'll be honest, because this is the nails made during the time of Jesus' crucifixion would have been iron, not steel. So iron corrodes like hell.
Well, if you look at the pictures of it, it is extremely corroded. But they did find pieces of bone and like ancient wood still attached to the nails from reputable studies. So it could be anybody because, the Romans, besides making the streets safe at night, besides aqueducts,
What did they ever do for us?
also crucified people.
Yeah, you beat me too. I was gonna say the Romans crucified a lot of fucking people.
But they weren't the first ones to do it. But they did probably
Popularize it.
perfect it.
You could say they really nailed it with crucifixion.
Oh, God.
Well, actually, I have a nail story for you, Nick. I don't know if this will ruin your timeline, but if I remember correctly, during the pioneer days,
You're way ahead. So we'll get there. But I'll let you know when you tell your story. Okay, so that's nail history from 3400 BC up until 1760. And around that time, when colonies were being settled, they didn't have the skilled carpenters that they had in back in Europe. So they used a lot more nails to build their houses. And the European carpenters would never do that because one, nails were expensive, and it was poor class. If any builder used nails in that way, Americans didn't care.
just for those wondering, when we say not use nails, pretty much it's just either joints or they use dowel rods, and they kind of use the dowel rod as a nail and then trim it. Yeah, the actual combining with metal nails. I'll be honest, Nick, I never really thought about when it came prevalent, and it seems like we're heading that direction.
Yeah, so
Of course, the British are really good at messing up a good thing. So not using nails might have been their downfall.
exactly. Well, a lot of nails were made in Europe. And so during the American Revolution, Europe just was not going to give goods to the people rebelling against them. And so this started the story of what I think you're about to tell people doing to their houses.
So what I know about nails is when people were going to move, it was usually cheaper to set the house on fire and then collect the nails through the ash and take the nails with them rather than just order new nails. Because here in America, much like in Europe, we have a bunch of old homes. Just ours are in the middle of the woods and not built on bodies. So there's less because, well, nails were expensive. And this sounds like this is why they did it, Nick, was because there was a chokehold on supply line, if that's where we're going.
Yeah, and it was getting so bad that at certain towns, with people moving and stuff, they had to pass laws like you cannot burn your own house down. Which now, like, can you imagine, like, you're sitting there just reading through old laws that have never been repealed, and there's a law about you can't burn your house down, and you're like, why the fuck would we have to make this law? Well, it's because that's something everyone did back then. So I think it's just interesting.
I love how our founding fathers' solution for chokehold, because we went to war for no taxation without representation, was to burn our own shit.
Well, and nails were so common in the colonies at the time that Thomas Jefferson, most Americans at night, that was like a hobby. They would make nails. But Thomas Jefferson considered himself a nail maker just because he would, most Americans, finish their day and then, as like a leisure / work thing, create nails.
I gotta say, nail maker might be the new term I use for sperm donor.
Nice.
But also, how much do I love Thomas Jefferson that he even gets involved with nails? God, Thomas Jefferson, we need one of the best presidents that goes too far underground. Like, people don't really appreciate how important he was.
Nope, I couldn't agree with you more. Big TJ fan. But anyway, America had a problem. We were burning our own houses down because those bastard Brits wouldn't sell us our nails. So, in 1795, Jacob Perkins of Massachusetts decided to create cut nails. Basically, it's just a press. You put a big sheet of metal underneath, you press down, and it forms the shape of a nail, but like a flat nail, not the cylindrical wire nails that we know today. Cut nails were mass produced, and rather than splitting the wood, they were hammered into it, and so they didn't split it as much, and so they're a lot better at holding on to stuff. And because they're mass produced, obviously the price fell dramatically. And I'd say by the 1830s, construction using these cut nails really took off, allowing mass-produced houses, where you order off the factory or, order from the Sears catalog or whatever it was at the time. They send you all the stuff and the nails and you put it together yourself. Was kind of, this brought this on.
And then hit yourself with a hammer on your thumb 10,000 times.
Yeah, but you no longer had to be a carpenter to do all this stuff. You could do it yourself.
Yeah, that's huge to not pay a skilled labor to do it and you can just do it yourself. That's huge.
Yeah, and so, and kind of to talk a little bit about, I didn't get too much into it, but we're also going to talk about screws a little bit.
Oh,
So the first,
Nick, you're just like teeing them up for me.
I know. I I only realized this like 30 minutes before we recorded, not during any of the research or anything. And I was like, oh boy.
Well, actually, I have a little bit of nail tidbit for you before we get into screwing it. Do you know where the term nailed it comes from?
I have no idea.
It's a Roman phrase from a poet called Horace. And it means to do something like immaculately. He's like, nailed it, did it great. And I'll be honest, if the Europeans thought nails were bad, but the Americans and ancient Romans thought nails were good, well, who in the history books has more wins? Romans and Americans versus Europeans? Just saying, maybe there is something to like in nails.
I believe it. So during the Middle Ages is when screws were first seen.
Well, people have been screwing for before that. So I'm sorry. It's too low hanging fruit.
So we talked about how the first mass-produced nail wasn't built until 1795. So the first screws were not mass-produced. So when you're thinking of like going to the hardware store and they have the thread and pitch like all these patterns, like coarse, fine grain, like, coarse or fine, attaching different washers and stuff. That's not what this was. This was some dude with the file meticulously making a screw by hand. So those two screws were the same.
Yeah,
and
I mean, didn't...
Do you know what they were used in, Mike? The first screws?
First screws, what they were used in. I feel like it's either going to be something really dumb or it's going to be religion.
Suits of armor.
Oh, that's way less dumb. Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. I figured they would use rivets instead of screws.
Yeah, but this is what's also shocking. Job and William Wyatt from Burton-on-Trent, England. Don't know if I pronounced it right and really don't care. It's England. In 1760, they made the first machine screws.
Yeah, because that's what the lathe was invented in 7040s, right?
Yeah, and these were flat tipped, and the screws we know today with like the pointed end that you can get into wood didn't come around until the Cole and Whipple.
Wait, when you say flat ended, are you talking about a bolt?
Yeah, a bolt.
Okay. You didn't nail it with that one, Nick. You kind of screwed that one up.
Well, I'm sorry.
Look,
the book I'm reading this from.
That was a great double whammy. Come on, that was so good.
I know. You got me. Oh, look, the next part I didn't underline. These screws were more like bolts. So anyway, in the 1840s, a group of Americans patented a way to make pointed screws, which made them much more efficient. So that's pretty much the history of screws. We're going to head on back to nails. So the next next advancement in nail technology came in 1863, and so they're called the wire nails. It's a nail we know today, a cylindrical nail. They're kind of French, kind of Belgian, mostly. I think France was the first one to do it, but Belgium kind of perfected it. And wire nails sounds exactly what you think. It's just a long strip of wire, and then they cut it to look like the nails we know today, and they are better than the cut nails.
Well, I imagine a big part of that has to be to cut the nail. You probably heat it up to do a hot cut, I imagine. And I imagine with these wire nails, a little bit more forge pressed.
Yeah, so these wire nails are a little stronger, and they're coiled steel, right? So they get that, some of them have that little groove. I mean, again, this wasn't like mass production like we know today. This was mass production relatively near industrial revolution. So,
Yeah, don't think in thousands, think of hundreds.
and think of everyone being different, like markedly different.
Ooh, love that quality control.
Well, I mean, every manufacturer being, I mean, probably every product, but also,
Oh yeah, being like, hey, I got this hole. I need to put a new nail in it. Well, this one's the only nail we got, and it's 3 times smaller. It's like, well, can't really use that.
yeah. So these wire nails were even cheaper than the cut nails. So even though the cut nails were technically stronger, the wire nails were cheaper. So America?
You know how people steal copper nowadays? Did people steal nails back then when it was hard to come by?
I mean, I'm sure people were burning down houses. I just don't know.
If their ideas was to get the nails, or they're just burning down houses for other reasons.
Yeah.
Huh? Maybe I should do some research and really nail down that path. This might be the episode I
Maybe.
break you. I might break your will.
Yeah, probably.
I'm really screwing it into you. Didn't nail it with that one. Don't worry, I'll hammer it home with the next one.
Last piece of information I have for you is that, so we classify nails in pennyweight, and this comes from medieval England. Nails were typically bought by the hundred, and so more weight, more cost. And so today, a 16 penny common wire nail is a nail that's used in residential construction. It's written as 16D. The D
in nail
is in what's that?
The T in nail.
The D. The D. So like.
Nick, I'm making a penis joke. D nail.
Oh, okay. It took me a minute.
Oh man,
I thought you were being an idiot.
No.
Well, yes.
Different kind of idiot.
But the D is a reference to the Latin name for Roman coin, which do you know? I feel like you know this one.
What, the Roman coin that starts with a D?
Yeah.
Isn't it like Dicion or something like that?
Denarius?
Denarius? No, just can't say that I actually do.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting that.
We're using Roman measurements.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's just like using a 2x4 isn't 2x4, but that's what it's been. So it's like the same thing, just older.
What did the Romans ever do for us? Literally everything.
Tell us how much nails should cost in way. Well, Mike, I don't have one, but do you have a final pun to end this podcast?
No, I think you really nailed it with discussing the history of nails. You know, everything from wood, which is your favorite, and well, I mean, anytime you can talk about wood, D, and nails in a story, and somehow fitting screwing, I think it's a good time. I think you hammered it home, and I absolutely adore this episode.
I'm sorry you had to listen to this.
Well, I didn't crucify them or anything, but they definitely got nailed. This might be up there for one of my favorites. I can just see the pain on your face every time I just open my mouth. It's not even if I have to make a pun.
Thank you all for listening. Thanks for listening to the Backyard Philosophy Podcast. We rarely finish a podcast without missing a point we wanted to bring up, so let us know what we forgot. And if you have a topic you want us to talk about, let us know at Backyard Philosophy on Instagram and Backyard Philosophy Podcast on